Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 65 of the Dynasty Junkies podcast, a proud member of the Dynasty Addicts podcast network. I am your host, going solo this week, Rocky Petrella at Dynasty FF Addict on Twitter. But since there's only one of me as host, I brought on two great guests from DLF, among other things. I'll let them plug whatever they're doing at the end. But first, we have Addison Hayes, Adam Mays Hayes on Twitter. Addison, how you doing tonight?
Great. Everything's good on my end. Just another week. It's Thursday night. I know this game's not really exciting right now, but just happy that football is on, and then we can get into week 3 and keep it going.
Yeah. There is some big news from tonight that we'll get into in a minute, but also his colleague from DLF, who I believe I butchered his name on when he was on game night by adding an R at the end, but it's Cal Shoemake, correct, Cal?
Correct. Doctor ran out of ink on the birth certificate, left the R off, and no, I appreciate you guys having me on. Excited to have a chance to get made fun of a little bit by Addison. I know it's coming later.
And before we get into what we have planned for the show, the big news I refer to is that Christian McCaffrey. Well, actually, this kind of fits because we usually start off with the injuries. So we have a week 3 injury. Christian McCaffrey left early in the second quarter with a hamstring injury, already declared out. Which it could be just because it's Houston, but often when they declare a guy out that quick, it's a pretty serious hamstring injury. Could be a multi-week thing. So. Any thoughts on CMC potentially if this is like a multi-week injury? And I guess more I'm wondering, the biggest interesting thing for me here is Chuba Hubbard and what you guys might think of him. So, Cal, any thoughts on that?
Really fascinating little mini story that I'll give you. I'll try to make it very quick, but I talked a lot pre-draft with Matt Waldman about his RSP and who he liked after some of the first few. And we talked about Chuba Hubbard, and his comparison was Mike Davis for how he was in college and kind of.
And this was before he was drafted?
This is before he was drafted, kind of the arc of his career. So if it is him, I know they signed Royce Freeman. Is Royce Freeman still there? Is he still?
He is still there, I believe. Yeah.
So I'd be curious to see, anytime a big part of your offense gets injured in the middle of a game, I almost feel like it's best to throw out what happened afterwards because it's rarely what's going to be in the plan for the next week. But if it is Chuba Hubbard and we get those reports, I am going to be excited to see what he does. I mean, that's another rookie we get a chance to get a look at. I hate that it comes at the cost of not seeing CMC because football's a lot better when he's playing.
Yeah, agreed there. And I was talking with Addison before the show. I think I only have 1 or 2 shares, so I'm not too worried about it. I think I have 0 Chuba shares. So this is more just kind of me looking from the sidelines almost on both guys. But I was never – the reason I have 0 shares is I was not a big fan of Chuba's tape coming out. He could hit the home run occasionally, it seemed like to me, and that's where he piled up a lot of his yardage. I didn't like his overall game, but did you have any thoughts on Chuba in the pre-draft process, Addison? And what do you think you might expect of him if he gets like a month here?
Coming out of college, Chuba was really interesting because he had that amazing 2019 season. And then whatever 2020 was, if there was outside influences or extra factors that didn't look like the same player, and statistically also was not the same player. So his draft process I felt like was really weird for fantasy and for the NFL. I did like the Carolina Panthers landing spot, and this was always kind of the upside with, getting Chuba Hubbard in Dynasty or taking a stab on him like in Scott Fish, Leighton, or if you have really big redraft benches, was the possibility that if Christian McCaffrey were to get hurt and miss any time at all, you potentially have a running back that we already saw in Mike Davis last year, that could see a lot of value and very similar workload to what Christian McCaffrey would have been getting already. And he's not Christian McCaffrey, so we're not going to expect that he's going to be a top 5 running back every week. But to be able to now, I think, plug him into your lineup as a RB2, potential flex even, especially for those teams out there that, especially in Dynasty, if you lost Cam Akers, if you lost J.K. Dobbins, you lost Travis Etienne, you now have a free running back. If you are a Clyde Edwards-Helaire manager and you're really disappointed in what CEH has been doing, you might be tempted with plugging in Chuba Hubbard. So, I think you basically, if you already had him on your roster, you have a free starter next week if Christian McCaffrey is out, and forever how long Christian McCaffrey might actually be out. So I like it. I like the potential, and that's always kind of been the kind of strategy and running backs that I like to go for. And Chuba's now we're just going to see the opportunity of what he can actually do.
Yeah, he's a prime, I guess, 0 RB guy with going into the season. If this happened, I mean, like I said, I wasn't his biggest fan, but and before Cal even made the comparison that he got from Waldman, I mean, if he can be, I was not the biggest Mike Davis fan before last year either, and we saw what he did when he got running that offense. So they seem to concentrate the load on one guy heavily, even if it's not Christian McCaffrey, maybe not 95% heavily, but Mike Davis got a lot of run as the lead guy last year. So I think he's definitely going to produce for you if this hamstring injury lingers on for a while. But we'll get into some of the other injuries from week 2. And the biggest one maybe there was the Andy Dalton bone bruise. We've all been waiting for Justin Fields' season. And so I guess, what do you think we can see from Fields right away? Do you think he'll be able to produce better than at least we've seen from Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence so far? And is this a good thing for Allen Robinson? Because the first 2 games have not been. Addison, I'll let you go first on this one.
Hopefully it's better for Allen Robinson. Yeah, because I mean, I think what Justin Fields presents is kind of the similar things that Justin Herbert could have brought and did bring to the table last year for the LA Chargers. Was the difference between Tyrod Taylor and Justin Herbert was now we have potential for, more passes going downfield, higher air yards, a lot of those, targets and receptions that are more valuable for fantasy football than Andy Dalton, that we've, has made the joke that nobody has really seen Andy Dalton throw past the first down marker in the first 2 games. So there's that potential. We have to remember that he is, of course, still a rookie. I feel like we kind of lose sight of that sometimes with rookies, and especially with this rookie class, that there's a lot of hype coming in for Zach Wilson after his preseason. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence, everybody hyping him up to be the best quarterback prospect since Andrew Luck. There's even still hype for Mac Jones once the Patriots cut Cam Newton. And there's still hype for Trey Lance whenever he comes in. But we have to remember that these guys are still rookies. They're getting used to the NFL still, the play of and the speed of the game. Obviously, the balls don't have white stripes on them, but that doesn't really impact the quarterback position.
Apparently, just the wide receiver position.
Just the wide receiver. So A-Rob and Darnell Mooney should be fine. But no, I am really excited, and I do hope that this kind of elevates the Bears' offense in a way that we all were hoping for and kind of expecting basically all summer once Justin Fields, was officially drafted by the Bears.
Yeah, I think that was a good point too you made about the deep ball, because I think that was one of Justin Fields' strengths, especially coming out relative to the rest of this class, especially is his deep ball and his accuracy, and that's definitely been lacking so far. What are your thoughts on Justin Fields' season, Cal?
I love to see it. He's one of the ones that of all the rookies coming out, so excited to see him on a football field, because I think what he can do with his legs is so special in like his ability to, like you said, push a ball downfield. Like the connection with Mooney is so exciting to me, because that's what Mooney needs. Mooney needs a quarterback exactly like him. Let him, make some plays, get loose, get behind a defender, and let a couple plays happen like that. I would imagine initially we're going to see a much more controlled Justin Fields. I think Nagy's going to keep the floaties on a little bit to try to, hold. I don't want to say hold him back, but I just think he's going to be. I don't think he's going to give him full reign of producing just yet. Browns have played 2 teams. Really interesting last week playing the Houston Texans. You got to see Tyrod Taylor, who can do some of the similar things that Justin Fields can, right? So if there's a game plan that can be had, Taylor scored a touchdown through the air and one on the ground. maybe that tells you that, that Justin Fields can do something similar. I hope Nagy took some notes because that could be fun to watch.
Yeah, and Fields in I think like half a game last week did run the ball 10 times. He did not get as much yardage as you might have expected. I did not see any film of the game, so I don't know how much of that was, if any, was designed or he just ran 10 times out of the pocket. But that's definitely, I mean, he's. I hate using this because it's so overused, but he's definitely got that Konami code, and he should have that high floor. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does. And I just hope, I'm just a little worried. I was on a podcast last night, Fantasy Timeline, and we were talking about the Jags and Urban Meyer. I just hope Matt Nagy doesn't ruin Justin Fields the way Urban Meyer appears to be ruining Trevor Lawrence. That's my biggest concern, is Matt Nagy holding him back. I think the sky's the limit for Fields, though.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the other injuries we wanted to talk about was Jarvis Landry going on the IR. Jarvis Landry, not a major fantasy asset, but it does weaken the Browns offense. And I thought it was kind of interesting. This seems to be happening just as OBJ is coming back. So do you have any hope left for OBJ? Because I do not. I've been basically looking at him as a wide receiver 3-ish type. Just that part of it's that offense. Part of it is, just they like to run so much. So do you think that maybe Landry out helps him, or would it have been better for him to have the guy on the other side? What do you think, Cal?
I am an LSU homer, and OBJ was one of my favorite players to watch. But this is a very different version of Odell Beckham than we saw in New York, and that we were hoping to see in Cleveland, right? Like, we have not seen him, capital letters Odell Beckham at all in Cleveland yet. The match with Baker that we thought could be special just never has been. And now he's coming off of an injury. There's been some delay in getting him out on the field. There's even some hesitation about, maybe it's going to be a game time decision, or, hopefully he doesn't have any setbacks and then we'll play him. Like, none of that to me sounds like somebody that I'm going to be looking to get into my lineup. If you play without him the first 2 weeks, play without him this week. But, you always hope with someone like this that you can, catch some of that lightning in a bottle. And obviously there's a chance the targets are there, but this might be a decent little, like, before anybody gets to see it, if you can sell him in Dynasty, to me, like, try to use some of this momentum and sell him, because I don't think it's going to be good.
Yeah, I'm with you there. It looks like Addison agrees too. I see him nodding his head. You're out on OBJ as well.
Yeah, it's rough, man, and it's so weird because the Browns and Baker Mayfield too looks so much better without him. Like, when Baker's not force feeding OBJ,
yes,
he's just able to sit back there and go through his progressions, and he doesn't have to force the ball to one single player. And OBJ at this point, like, this kind of sucks to say, but he's kind of is like how AJ Green was for the Bengals last year, where he had like 10 targets, 11 targets every single game, and then came down with like 3 or 4 for 40 yards, and that's just kind of where he was. And that sucks to say for OBJ, because there's so much hype, like Kyle said, for him on the Browns, and that's just it's not realistic. I don't see it. He kind of was an afterthought for me this whole entire summer. I was just kind of like, OBJ. So yeah, I'm not in on it at all. I know that there's still some OBJ truthers out there. Maybe you have one in your league if you still have OBJ and you can just sell him off. At this point, I don't know. I feel like I would take, I wouldn't say almost anything, but almost anything at this point. Just a second round pick. Take, Elijah Moore, if you can make that swap. I don't know if you can, but like, just find some other wide receiver that's not OBJ and maybe gain 5 or 6 years of age back.
Yeah, I was a believer in OBJ up until the injury last year, and then I was just like, that's it. I'm finally out. When he comes back, he's going to be, and we see he hasn't even come back yet. He's going to be, a 28-year-old coming off a major injury. He already wasn't producing. He's going to have no value. Like you said, I'd be happy to get a sec. I think I have him on one roster at this point, and it is a home league, so maybe I can swing that OBJ for Elijah Moore type swap. Maybe they're not as up on the rookies, and they see Elijah with the slow start and are thinking, let me get rid of this guy and get the name OBJ. I may try that after the pod tonight. So, but we'll move on. And this is another one that we can kind of talk about in conjunction with the game tonight, because Tyrod Taylor went to the IR with the hamstring, was playing surprisingly well before he got hurt. Keeping the Texans competitive. They won their first game, and then they were right in it with the Browns until he got hurt. And we get to see Davis Mills tonight. We're at halftime as we're recording now. It looks like they're kind of giving him some probably easy passes. I saw some of the game before we came on. I haven't really seen it since we started, but 9 for 11 for 79. And a touchdown to Anthony Miller, of all people. But he is keeping Brandon Cooks alive, it looks like. 4 for 60 for Brandon. I don't have how many targets here, but I'm sure he's getting the lion's share. So it looks like Brandon Cooks can keep this. Is Brandon Cooks quarterback proof, Addison?
Certainly seems like it.
I know. I wouldn't have thought it coming into the year, but
yeah, no, that's wild. Because at the beginning of his career, he had like the greatest quarterback luck of all time.
Right.
I mean, he went from Drew Brees to Tom Brady, and then got stuck, I guess, with like Jared Goff, but Jared Goff is your quarterback, makes Allen Robinson really jealous.
Yeah.
And then just kind of went down to Houston. Had I don't remember. He did have Deshaun Watson. Last year, and then now has still been fine with Tyrod, and I guess tonight Davis Mills as well. So it's wild, but good for Brandon Cooks, man. Good for Brandon Cooks.
I benched him in a couple places tonight because of Davis Mills, and it looks like that may have been a mistake. So I think we got to lock him in our lineups going forward. Any thoughts on Cooks or anything else with the Texans offense minus Tyrod before we move on to the next one, Cal?
We don't spend a ton of time on this, but I can't tell you how many times I have thought I wish Tyrod Taylor was a rookie now. Like, I wish this was like he was coming out like in the last couple of years, because I think he was just a little bit too early. People were still scared of the running quarterback, and no offensive coordinator wanted to be the first, right? They didn't want to step out there and like be the one to like, yeah, we're gonna push this. And again, not the first. Obviously, you had Vic and you had Steve Young. You had other ones, Cunningham,
and my guy Randall.
Do what?
And my guy Randall Cunningham.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Back in the day. Yeah.
But you didn't have – nobody had a huge amount of respect for that, right? It seemed like gimmicky.
Right.
But now it's so much more mainstream. Like, I think Tyrod Taylor, nobody thought about – or at least he was in situations where nobody thought that they could build around him. And now I think he'd be the kind of quarterback that could come out and you would think, okay, I can build around this guy. And he looked so good in that game against the Jaguars. I went back and rewatched that one after because I just wanted to see what happened because it was such a, shocking thing. He looks so good. He's poised, the way he maneuvers the pocket. Like, there are so many great things to like about him. I hate that he got hurt because I think he was en route to having a good year. And I just wish I wish he was 10 years younger.
Yeah, that's an interesting point I hadn't thought of, and it's funny you say that too about people not really valuing it as much, because I think even the quarterbacks themselves. Like, I remember as an Eagles fan back in the day, Donovan McNabb hated to talk about his running or be thought of as a running quarterback. He wanted to, let everybody know how good of a passer he was, and these guys nowadays they utilize it the way they should, and they own it. They want to be, Lamar. I don't think Lamar. I mean, I know Lamar wants to be known as a good passer, but I don't think he gives a crap. He's just like, I want to win. I'm going to run, and this is how I'm going to beat you. So I like that point, and you're right. And Tyrod too. He's kind of done pretty well wherever he's been. He hasn't lit things up, but he's generally been a serviceable fantasy quarterback, and he's also won a lot. Like, I think the Bills made the playoffs like one time in like the last 15 years before McDermott got there, or maybe it was the first year McDermott got there. It was with Tyrod or something. I just know that he had ended, I think, their long playoff drought when he was still the starter there. But we'll go on to the 49ers, who have every RB on their team pretty much hurt. Elijah Mitchell looked good in week 1. Was not that great against the Eagles in week 2, but was getting all the run. And then he hurt his shoulder. JaMychal Hasty was mixed in a little there. He got hurt. It's going to be out several weeks. and then Trey Sermon finally gets a carry and gets concussed. So they're bringing in all kinds of guys, and I guess what I want to ask is, how do you guys think this is going to shake out? And are you looking to invest in this backfield? Because if you can get the guy, because there's so much uncertainty, maybe you can get the guy cheap and it works out. Or are you looking to stay away from this backfield because there's so much uncertainty and you don't want any part of it? So, Addison, what do you think?
I'm gonna copy something. So on the DLF YouTube channel, we have a show called Mannequin Chill. That's Scott Connor and Shane Manila. It's fantastic. Those two are brilliant when it comes to Dynasty. And Scott says something on the episode that just dropped yesterday, Wednesday morning, about the 49ers backfield. And he said basically his strategy is going to be when invest in the cheapest guy, or maybe a couple of the cheaper guys, and then whenever they get to the point where they now become the consensus, the guy, and that their value raises up, to then sell at that point, and then just kind of reinvest into whoever then is the cheapest in that backfield again. Because for this is the third or fourth year now where this rotation of guys just becomes necessary because of I don't know if it's the running backs that Shanahan chooses to invest in that get hurt, or if this is like a practice problem or something with all of these guys getting hurt, between Mostert, Tevin Coleman, even Jeff Wilson. And now it's happening with the two rookies in Trey Sermon and Elijah Mitchell this year, and JaMychal Hasty. And I think that's the best way to approach it, because that there is going to be at least an opportunity, if not to play those guys that you have in Dynasty that you invested in so cheaply in, but at least a sell point where you could maybe get a second round pick for them and then just kind of go back and do it all again with someone else. So I really like that. And I think that is kind of the way to go for the 49ers backfield.
Okay, so you're saying sell and then reinvest in Jeff Wilson.
Yeah, exactly. Although I don't know, people are kind of on to Jeff Wilson now.
I know
you might not be able to, but if you got the guy that wins TJ Yeldon or Lamar Miller on the waiver wire, and then you
Carry on
them
Johnson
for like a third, or Carry on Johnson, that's kind of free money at that point in Dynasty, even if it's a third or a fourth round. But that's just kind of the way to go.
And Cal, do you have a guy that you think will take the reins? Is Elijah the guy? Are you a Sermon guy? What do you think?
Well, I will first say that I was all over Sermon during the draft season. I loved Trey Sermon.
I know Waldman loved him.
yeah, exactly. And I definitely I love. I for the first time ever, I wrote in a magazine. I did a write up on a bunch of different prospects, and one of them was Trey Sermon. So I watched him a bunch and just fell in love with what he could do. Like, there are some special good things he can do, especially getting tougher yards, falling forward, at the point of contact where a lot of running backs might, stop there. He'll get an extra couple yards. He's got a lot of that in his game. So that could be a great wrinkle, especially against a game script against the Philadelphia Eagles, for instance, where there wasn't a lot of running room. There was against the Lions. There wasn't against the Eagles. Surprise, but I think that is the perfect moment to play him. But without injuries, Sermon wasn't going to see the field in that game. So at some point, I think this is something we do as a fantasy community. We trust what we saw on college tape, but that's such a small part of the overall picture. I love what those guys can do to break it down. And I think breaking down the physical skill set is immensely important. But sometimes we need to be able to adjust, because there's so many parts of what makes an athlete a great athlete that aren't their physical tools. It's the mental side that we don't get to see. We don't see them in practice. We don't see, how they respond to competition, which that's a question for Trey Sermon, right? He ran away from that in college. I hate to even bring that up, but he did. That's part of his background, right? It's part of it. So to me, Kyle Shanahan likes Elijah Mitchell more. And if Elijah Mitchell's an option and Trey Sermon's an option, we just saw it last week, Elijah Mitchell's going to get the ball. Now, is that always going to stay that way? Real quick, I'm sorry to talk too much here, but let me just.
No, it's fine.
Yeah. I went back through and I wanted to see if there was ever a time. I know we think that it's just a randomizer about who's going to get the carries in the backfield, right? Like that's kind of what it seems like if you pay attention to Twitter. I went back game by game and I tried to find another instance where there was a healthy scratch that then started and like got the dominant carries for him. It did not ever happen. I never saw where that happened for Kyle Shanahan. I did see where somebody was injured and scratched that then came and got their job back when they, once they were healthy. So that creates a whole other wrinkle when you think about Jeff Wilson, because he was the guy last year and now injured and does he get the job back? And so I think in Dynasty, Jeff Wilson, I think he's 28. I mean, he's older than people think. And so to me, Elijah Mitchell's probably the guy I want right now because I just think Kyle Shanahan likes him more.
Yeah, and it's funny you kind of mentioned the injured scratch thing, because I was just thinking too. What I was going to ask you is, as someone who did like Trey Sermon initially, anyway, is it looks like he may clear concussion protocol, and it's not 100% for sure Elijah Mitchell is going to be able to play this week. And I was going to ask you if you thought that he could take, like, is he good enough that he might take that job? Or do you think Shanahan gives it back to him in week 4 if Mitchell just needs a week to rest?
So this is, if you're a Trey Sermon believer, this is what you needed to happen. And, nobody likes for it to happen via an injury, but this is what you needed. You need an opportunity for him to go out there and win the job back, because it's clear he was not the guy that Shanahan wanted for week 1 or week 2. Like, that was a bad start to Sermon. If you believe Sermon's going to be a dynasty commodity for us that we love and is productive for us, that's a bad start. That's a really bad start. This is the opportunity he needs to go out there and prove that he can be the guy. And I think if he goes out there and does it, I 100% think Shanahan he wants to win games. And if that's the best guy and he proves he's the best guy, he'll get that shot and he can take it back from Mitchell. I believe, but I think he's off to a bad start and he's got some making up to do. And this week's going to go a long way for that, I think.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I do think that if Mitchell will definitely be involved, even if he does not, even if Sermon has a good game this week, we're going to see Mitchell again in week 4 or 5, and then Jeff Wilson will come in. But to you guys' point, I mean, they have tended to, I think, run with a lead guy that even when, it seems to flip-flop back and forth, that's often because of injury. So it'll be interesting to see with now Mitchell being that lead guy week 1 and 2, and then it might be Sermon week 3 because of injury. Who is it going to be week 4? Who's it going to be week 7 when Wilson's back? So it's pretty much impossible to predict. We're all just making guesses. I've kind of put my bets on Elijah Mitchell, but we'll have to see how it plays out thanks to the shoulder injury. It's funny, too, because I've heard a lot of people compare, and I agree that he's very similar to Mostert in style. And apparently he's similar to Mostert in injury ability, too. So, yeah, because Mostert's always had that job when he's healthy, but he can barely last a quarter, it appears sometimes. So so the last major injury we wanted to talk about, and then we'll get into a few guys we wanted to talk about from week 2. But Tua was the other big one this week. Had the rib injury. They're calling it cracked ribs now. Definitely out Sunday, could be longer. I was a big Tua believer, especially coming into this 2021 season, and he did not show a ton against New England, but that is a pretty good defense. Then he barely had any time before he got the injury against the Bills. So I'm still not out on Tua. I know some people are. Addison, where were you at on Tua before the injury, and are you concerned this is just going to knock him down even more, and it's going to be a problem going forward for Miami. Miami already did not seem to trust in him. So if he's out an extended period of time, is this going to cause even bigger problems for his career going forward?
No, I don't think this is going to cause problems for his career moving forward. I still think that he is definitely Miami's guy. And I think that even though there was the talks and the links with Deshaun Watson and stuff like that, I feel like they've made it pretty clear that they wanted to at least have the opportunity, to solidify and like 100% confirm that he is the guy and can be the guy moving forward. And I did really like Tua coming into this season. I thought that he was going to be a lot better than what we saw in his rookie year, just because of all the new weapons that they got in Will Fuller and Jalen Waddle. And they have a new offensive system and coordinator, and a system that's now built around Tua and not really Chan Gailey building around Ryan Fitzpatrick. So I did like the opportunity that Tua had, and this is really upsetting that he is going to miss however many weeks, with broken ribs, because that could be, a really big problem, not just for the weeks that he sits out, but then kind of, when he comes back, if he takes one really bad shot, then it's just kind of, aggravating a little bit. But I do still really like Tua. I liked him a lot, specifically in Dynasty, because I thought that he represented a very good value and was an easy bet to see the rise in Dynasty value as well, if any production were to come out of it, just because of where he was being valued relative to other quarterbacks. And I still think that that is true. And this injury might honestly push him down a little bit more, or at least make more people, like the people that were like, well, let me see what Tua has, and then I can decide what to do with him. This injury might leave some of those managers, wanting a little bit more, and you might be able to sell on a quarterback that's doing really well. Like, you might be able to turn Derek Carr and a little something extra into Tua for like a dynasty move, right? You could kind of do, I think, something like that and be better off for the future of your dynasty superflex leagues and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, I was just going to make that point that, as you were saying, that the two guys we're going to talk about in a little bit, Derek Carr and Daniel Jones, both gotten off to really good starts, and guys that I'd rather have Tua over both of them, and that's the same reason I liked them a lot too. I'm a guy that tends not to pay up for quarterbacks, not to draft them early, even in Superflex. So I loved you were getting Tua at a QB2 price in startups or in trade, and I thought he could be a QB1 this year, and now it's going to have to wait to see it a little bit. Going forward, Cal, you worried about starting anybody on Miami? Is Jacoby Brissett too far of a drop? I mean, it's not like Miami's been lighting the world up in the first two games with the two, or at least partial two in game 2 and 2 in game 1. So are you concerned about these weapons until Tua comes back?
Concerned about maybe the weapons that haven't solidified themselves. Oh wait, yeah, that's all of them. None of them have solidified themselves in Miami. And you bring in Brissett. He had a good year with T.Y. Hilton, in Indianapolis. So you hope maybe he can bring some of that magic. Is that a Will Fuller type? That we can look at him. Maybe I'm glad that we're going to get to see him on the field with Brissett. It's just a Pandora's box about it. Who knows what's going to come out of it at this point? We don't know. We know it wasn't good last week, but again, I almost throw everything that happens with an injury like that. You get a change. I like to just throw it out and not even just pretend like it doesn't exist, because that's not, the game plan at all is going to be different when they have a chance to line up, come up this week. But might be good for Addison's boy, Myles Gaskin. Might try to run the ball a little bit more. That's my biggest takeaway.
Or get some of those dump offs if he's getting a little pressure, doesn't know where to go.
PPR
value.
You're a Myles Gaskin fan, Addison?
Oh yeah.
You need to talk to Bobby Koch. He was doing the Myles Gaskin bullet dodging tracker in the offseason. If he got past free agency, he got past the draft. But yeah,
I think they both reminisced and celebrated each other's dynasty championships on the back of Myles Gaskin.
There you go. Okay, so we wanted to like I said last week on our first in-season episode. During the season, we're just going to kind of pick out a handful of guys or some storylines and that we want to talk about each week. And this is still going to be a little similar to last week and kind of the early season stuff. Is it real? Is it not? And what we're thinking about what's happening so far. So the one I had to start off with, because I've been talking about, especially too, because Cal, for some reason, does not know, what he has in TJ Hawkinson. But I had to bring up Hawk because I've been touting the guy on 2 pods all off season, and it's basically at least 3. And again, if I wanted to say too, if I can't take if I can't take a victory lap after week 2, what's the point of having a podcast? So I had to do it. So, but it's not that not everyone, but a lot of people, thought Hawkinson was going to be good. He was like tight end 5 last year. And some people said he could even be better than last year. But I don't think a lot were saying that he's going to be definitely in that elite tier where he's going to be that difference maker. He's going to be that Kelsey, that Waller, that Kittle. And that's what I was saying. And after 2 weeks, Addison's making a face, but after 2 weeks, that's that. Or is that because you were saying that? I'm not sure what that face was.
I was in that boat. I was
okay, yeah, but I don't think that was the prevailing sentiment. And that's what I've been saying all off season. After this year, we're going to think of him how we think of Kittle, how we think of Waller, as one of those guys. And through 2 weeks, 1.5 premium, he's tight end 3, but he's less than 2 points behind Kelsey, slightly behind Gronk, who, we don't expect to keep that up. That's largely based on 4 touchdowns in the first 2 games. And Waller's up there. And then between Hawk and Fant at 5, there is a 12-point per game difference. So he's in that difference maker tier, at least through 2 weeks. I expect him to keep it up. He's got 8 catches in both games. He's got a touchdown in both games. He's probably not going to catch a touchdown per game, but I expect the targets and the catches to continue. So my question to you, Kel, is what the hell is wrong with you that you don't like TJ Hawkinson?
Come on, Cal.
Well, I think the threading the needle here, like you just did with the argument, for me was never look, he was top 5 last year. It's not a matter of like top 5 or not. Like, yes, top 5, I think was, especially in Dynasty, like that is him. My thing is last season, the difference between tight end 3, which is, where Hawk was, and tight end 16 was about 3 times closer than tight end 3. So there's 100-point difference between tight end 3 last year and Darren Waller. 125 points from tight end 3 to Travis Kelsey. And so Jonnu Smith finished as the tight end 16. So I get it. Like, yes, you could not have picked a better start for TJ Hawkinson. And yeah, this is the time you better victory lap now because we'll see how it carries on. And I'm not trying to say it definitely won't. Like, this is exactly what you want to see. And we could talk about some of the underlying numbers because I think he's a very different player than he was last year right now. But last year after 2 weeks, it was Kelsey, Waller, Jonnu Smith, Noah Fant, and Tyler Higbee. That was our top 5 after 2 weeks in 2020. And everybody was saying, oh, Jonnu, we knew it. He was going to separate himself and be one of that top tier. And he was there after 2 games. He was good. That obviously he finishes the tight end 16. And I'm not saying Hawkinson will do that, but I still have so many questions about this offense. I still have so many questions about Goff. I have questions about how they're going to respond to what this offense has done over the course of the first 2 games, because the correction is coming. The counterpunch is coming. Is he good enough to continue to put up those numbers? And can he make up 100-point difference between him and Darren Waller last year? How many targets does he need to make up that difference and be in that tier? That's a lot. That's a lot.
I have some of my own thoughts, but I want to let Addison respond to you first.
I've been ragging on Cal so long for this as well. I have the screenshot of his redraft rankings from tight end ready to go when TJ Hawkinson is a difference-making tight end this year. To me, so the whole thing that I saw from TJ Hawkinson this year was that he was the clear-cut number 1 target on this team. I mean, you had Tyrell Williams and Khalif Raymond and Quintez Cephas and everybody's favorite Amon-Ra St. Brown, but was drafted on day 3. And, just a bunch of guys that we really didn't believe in to make a difference at the wide receiver position. And I thought it was going to be TJ Hawkinson and DeAndre Swift. And I thought that there was a very real possibility that TJ Hawkinson leads the Lions in targets. And at least through 2 games, that's looking pretty good. I mean, again, TJ Hawkinson has 20 targets. DeAndre Swift has 16. So they're the 2 target leaders, and that's kind of what's coming to fruition here.
That's 170 target pace, Cal.
Mhm.
170 targets, Cal. I don't think that he's
I'm
going to
gonna
get
bet the under.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to get there and continue this fire 10 target per game pace. But I do think that it has shown at least that he can be a difference making tight end. And I think that if this continues, and I said, I was like, I don't think 130, 140 targets in this offense is really out of the range of possibilities. I thought it was actually a lot closer to safe prediction than it was like an outlier ceiling type season. And I look back, every tight end who has received at least 130 targets has finished as a top 3 tight end. And I believe 17 or 18 out of the 21 or 22 tight ends that did that since 2000 to receive 130 targets in a season all scored over 230 fantasy points, which would definitely really cut into, what Darren Waller did last year around 280. And then Hawkinson being at a minimum 230 would really make him a difference-making tight end. And he could be averaging 14, 15 fantasy points per game. And that's, that is a difference-making tight end for you and a true positional advantage.
Yes.
And I really wish that I had the courage to rank him over George Kittle in redraft. I just kind of plugged George Kittle in because he was like consensus tight end 3. I had my concerns, and those concerns seem to be coming true at least a little bit here. And everything I loved about TJ Hawkinson seems to be coming through. And I wish that I just had that courage to rank him tight end 3 over George Kittle, but I didn't. But I love what I'm seeing out of TJ Hawkinson, and I have him on so many freaking leagues and redraft and best ball because he was drafted in the 5th round. I was like, easy money, give me that, and I love it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. He's my most owned legit tight end. I think I actually have more shares of Gerald Everett as a guy I was buying low in a lot of places. But in terms of legit tight ends, I have no more shares of anybody than TJ Hawkinson. And I'm with you on the targets. 130, I think, is definitely within reach. I think easily within reach as long as he stays healthy. And Cal or Addison, how many targets do you think Waller had last year? Because he had, I'm not going to make you guess, he had 117.
Oh.
And he produced that season. Maybe he's not quite, Hawk isn't quite as efficient, but I do think he's going to have more than 117 target. I'm sorry, it was 2 years ago. It was 146 last year. My bad. I was going to say, yeah. But he did have a great season in 2019 as well. And I think Hawk could easily have that season. Maybe not quite as good as last year, but I think 146 is not crazy. Like we said, he's on 170 pace. There is no one else to throw to in that offense. Goff is not great, but he's a legit NFL quarterback. He's better than people treat him like he was like QB 27 coming into the season in ADP. And I never liked Goff, but he's not horrible. He's not, Nathan Peterman or something. So
funny about that argument was people are like, oh, Jared Goff can't support TJ Hawkinson as a top tight end. Meanwhile, George Kittle broke the receiving record for tight ends with over 1,300 and had his breakout campaign with a combination of Jimmy Garoppolo, Nick Mullins, and CJ
That's true. Yeah.
And it's just like, it doesn't matter. As long as he gets the targets, it doesn't matter who his quarterback is.
And people will give all the credit to Sean McVay, but he did support 2 number 1 wide receiver ones in LA. And he did have to make those throws, as good of a coach as Sean McVay might be. That was my other argument, because people would always say, oh, well, Goff and the offense. Like, is the Raiders offense the last 2 years been some juggernaut that's producing Darren Waller? And he's got nothing around him either, and no one to take pressure off him, and he's producing. So to me, they're very similar situations, and except Waller's just a lot older. Probably a little more athletic than TJ, but TJ's not unathletic. So
no,
Cal,
he's very athletic. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else you want to say about how dumb you were?
Yes. Well, because here's the thing, and I mentioned it, he's being used very different. It's not, to me, being the best target on his team, like that, just, you earn the targets that you get. Like he had 100 and however many you said, 101, and then but his separation was 20th amongst tight ends, 13th in average cushion. It's not like he was creating this like incredible separation and demanding targets the way that a Darren Waller or a Travis Kelce will. But like what's so different that I think it could be really exciting about Hawk, and he absolutely could be this, is look, last year he was 13th in slot snaps. Only 21% of his snaps were coming out of the slot. I failed to realize how big of a difference Penei Sewell was going to make for him, because now that they have a better offensive line than last year, he's right now a 51% rate out of getting slot snaps. That's a huge change. 20% of his snaps to 51%. That's part. So now he's running more routes. He's literally first in the NFL at running routes as far as tight ends. He was 8th last year. So if he's getting he's the 13th best as far, 21% of his snaps are coming out of the slot, 8th most routes run. That was not a combination that to me was ever going to equal getting more targets and getting himself to a place where he was going to be in that difference maker. So the fact that they're utilizing him so differently than they did last year, now some of those skills that like he can showcase those skills that we've seen after the catch, for instance, on some of his plays, or, being able to go up and kind of high point the ball. Some of his route running is better because he's in the slot working against somebody different. Can get up free.
I just want to say that was another argument that I would make to people too, is people wanted to say that, oh, well, he didn't have much competition last year. Galladay was out most of the year. Marvin Jones is better than anybody by far that's on that team this year. But there's also the idea that you can improve in year 3, especially for a tight end in your 3rd year in the league. It doesn't mean what he was last year is what he's going to be this year.
No, and improve. Yeah, he probably has improved somewhat, but he now has the role that looks like a difference maker tight end. So like how he's being used, if he was right now this season being used the same way as last year, he wouldn't have these numbers, and I would have little. I would not think, like, I would see this as an aberration. Like, I would not think of this as like this is sustainable if he's still getting 21% of his snaps out of the slot. If he's still not, up there with running the most amount of routes, things like that.
He'd be back down with like Noah Fant at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Which is still, you can be a top 5 tight end with that, and Hawk proved that last year. It's just. But even still with Addison's projection, that's still 50 points less than Darren Waller and almost 100 points less than Kelce last year. So that's still a big difference. I think he can still make some of that up. And like, if he keeps doing this, he will be that difference maker. If you start seeing some of those numbers decline, to me, that's where we start saying like, they're asking him to block more, or they're asking him, they're pulling him inside more. That's where I would be a little bit more concerned.
And I'm not saying necessarily that he's going to outproduce Kelce this year, or even necessarily Weller, but I think he's going to be in their neighborhood. That's basically been my whole point. And I have my little scroll at the bottom of the screen for anybody watching that says Hawk tight end 1. I do not mean that by production. What I wanted to say is if he does finish in that neighborhood, and let's say Kyle Pitts does what he's done in these first 2 games, is in that. Because I think these are the only. I think after this year, Kelce will likely not be considered the tight end 1 in Dynasty in terms of value. So, do you think that? What was that?
I think he's already not in DLF September. DLF
True, I think Pitts is there.
Yeah,
but if Hawk has this season, if Hawk is neck and close to this, is in that neighborhood, like right now, he's neck and neck with Kelce. He's above Waller. Let's say he fades off a little bit, but he's still there, and Pitts isn't near that production. He's one of that group that's, he's a tight end 8, tight end 10. He has a very good season for a rookie, but does not produce the way Hawk is. Is there any chance Hawk is tight end 1, or is it going to be Pitts?
No chance. I don't think there's anything that Pitts can do to not be the tight end 1. I saw a stat.
Even though Hawk is very, very young and might be producing an elite season.
I just think that's the way, because ADP is a snapshot of what people think, right? And I just think there's going to be that second-year hype for Pitts. It's already come before he had a chance to go on the field. And look, I know, like, yes, some of the production and really just the touchdowns haven't been there. But I read a stat or heard a stat today. I wish I could give it credit. I don't remember where it was from. But the Falcons are averaging 5 extra yards, over 5 yards per play with him on the field, more than when he's not on the
I
field.
saw that. Yeah.
That's
Sheesh.
insane. He's a difference maker.
I just, to me, that is insane though, that if Hawk has this season, what he's done in the first 2 games, like I said, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if he does, to at 24 Hawk is 24, 25, and he does that, and just because Pitts had hype coming into the season doesn't come near. To me, I'll be selling Pitt. I do have a few Pitts shares. If that happens, I'll be selling Pitts for Hawk everywhere, Hawk Plus, because that's what I would want. Because you're getting if he has this season that he's had in the first 2 games, you're getting a potential Kelsey at 24 or 25. I don't have Hawk's age in front of me. I wish I did, but 7, 8, 9 years younger. With Pitts, we still have yet to see that. I know everyone assumes it's going to happen. But Hawk will be tight end 1 in my heart, if not in ADP. So, so I guess we've rambled on quite a bit already here, and we still have a few guys to get through. We'll try and knock some of these out quicker because we spent a lot of time on Hawk there. One of the other things we wanted to talk about, we mentioned earlier, Derek Carr and Daniel Jones. Depending on your scoring, they're somewhere in the top 10 right now. I think Daniel Jones is the top 5 in most formats. Are either of these not top 5, obviously, but do you think either of these guys are sustainable as a QB1 for the entire season? Whoever wants to answer.
QB1?
Yeah, top 12 in production, not ADP.
I don't think Carr is. I think Daniel Jones possibly, if the rushing stance, not 9 for 95 and a touchdown, but like if we're seeing a rushing floor of like maybe 40 yards per game, and he falls into the end zone a handful of times more over the course of the season, I definitely think he'd be in the quarterback 1 discussion at the end of the year. And mind you, he's been doing this without basically any Kenny Golladay production. Like if they at any point the rest of the year figure out what the heck they're doing, then that's just going to elevate Daniel Jones's passing stats as well. And if Kadarius Toney, whenever he receives his first career receiving yard, then that will be good for Daniel Jones as well.
He also faced 2 pretty tough defenses his first 2 games too, Denver and Washington.
That's right. So they're still going to have their opportunity to face, the Dallas Cowboys defense and the Philadelphia Eagles.
Hey.
After Darius Slay. And I do think that Daniel Jones can sustain QB1. But I do think that would mostly be because he has a pretty decent rushing floor. And if Saquon Barkley, I feel like he's doing all of this right now without really having Kenny Golladay, with all of its like Sterling Shepard. He hasn't had Evan Ingram at all. Saquon Barkley has been like slowly put back into the snap counts. Kadarius Toney's been a donut in 2 weeks. Like all of the weaponry and stuff that we were excited for Daniel Jones to show what he hasn't had almost any of that. So if the rushing stays and all those passing weapons come back and can come back and help drive Daniel Jones's passing production, we could absolutely see him as a top 10 quarterback even.
Okay, and I know that's what I was going to say as well, is that I think if either of them does, it's got to be Jones because of the rushing. We've seen that it takes a special passing season to be a QB1 generally. At best, you maybe sneak into the 10 to 12 range with a very good season. But we're going to go a little bit lightning around here so we can get through the rest of these guys and still get on to our Find Me a Trade without, holding up people listening to this podcast for like 2 hours. So, but I did want to, since we had a question in the chat, I did want to put that up here, which was, are you guys starting Fields over Cousins as the QB2 in a super flex league, full PPR? Have that decision in about 10 leagues. Starting either Lamar, Dak, or Allen as my QB1, depending on the league, I guess. So I guess either of you want to, I guess both of you want to answer that real quick. Cal, would you start Fields over Cousins, or are you going Cousins? Cousins started off great as well. He's another guy that people hate that's a top 10 QB right now.
What you were hoping to see if you had Cousins is Minnesota's defense not performing well. Zimmer worked so hard to remake that defense over the offseason, and it looks just as terrible as it did last year. That's good news for you if you have Kirk Cousins. And yeah, like I think that is good. That's good news. The Osborne breaking out, like there are some things to like about what you're seeing in Minnesota for their offense. So yeah, I still want Kirk Cousins. I would like to see a week for Fields. If he gets a chance to do everything we hope he does this week, you're going to be happy that he's blowing up on your bench. Kirk Cousins is going to do well too. And who do they have? Seahawks this week, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And Seahawks have not been very good against stopping the pass this year, all of a sudden, just like they started off last year. So yeah, I'm starting Kirk Cousins.
I agree with you, Cal. Cousins, if you guys don't know, has been kind of my guy this offseason as like I mentioned earlier, the guy who invests in the second tier, ADP 12 to 20 type quarterbacks. Everybody hates him, and he finishes as a low end QB1 almost every single year. I believe Ryan from DLF had put out a tweet early this offseason that really turned me on. I was like, oh, wow. He's 5 of his 6 starting seasons, he's been QB, I think, 11 or better. It was just that first Viking season where he was not. Every other season he has been. So you on the Cousins train too? Cousins over Fields, Addison?
Yep, give me that. That's going to be a decision you're going to have all year, but it's going to be Cousins until I agree with Cal, until we see Fields actually do it.
Okay, so thanks for the questions. The question in the chat, Ridley Truth, there are guy who's been here, I think, pretty much the whole time watching. I appreciate it. So Cal, I put this is how I put it on the show sheet. CEH WTF. So he's been very, very, especially this last game was very poor. He only had 2.6 points after that fumble, PPR points. He was not good, but not awful in the first game with, I think, just over 10. I think it was 10.2 fantasy points. I know this is another subject we talked about on the pod I was on last night, Fantasy Timeline. If you're not listening to them, they're also on the DAP network. Go listen to them right after you finish listening to this. But I think I'm in the very small minority that still is a bit of a believer in CEH. It is just 2 weeks. And he produced well last year. It is probably the best offense in the league still. He's going to get his chances. He's still getting a lot of he had, I think, 78% of the snaps week 1. It did come down a little, but only to 65 week 2. He's still the clear lead back in that backfield. The goal line carries are going to be an issue, most likely. They did take him out for Darrell Williams, who had -3 yards, but had that touchdown. So what do you think? Are you still in on CEH? Or are you like everybody else and he's dead? That's what I'm seeing on Twitter. CEH is dead.
To me, this is a great buy low point for him.
I like that.
Yeah, so this is a safe space for my CEH love. I'm glad to see that. Because look, there's I'm gonna get crushed for this, but it's true. When they play in the same weeks, he still has outscored Jonathan Taylor more times than Jonathan Taylor has outscored him. That is still a true stat.
Going back to last year
right now, but that is 100% true.
By the way, Jonathan Taylor only had 5 more points than CEH last week.
Yeah,
he had like 7. Yeah.
Terrible time for him to have his first ever career fumble, right? I mean, that was just awful. And so everybody sees it. There's already this negative, cloud surrounding him. But don't forget, we just completely forgot he got hurt in week 2 of the preseason. That was like 4 or 5 weeks ago.
That's right, yeah. I had actually forgot that.
Yeah.
And I'm a believer. I could have used that to make an excuse for him, and I forgot about that.
Well, I think that's why. Look, he's tough. He played through some injuries last year too, and I think he's a tough kid that's gonna go out there and give his best when he can. But I just think he was limited by that injury. It was apparently on the inside of the ankle, and just Jeff had some things to say about that. Our PT, our fantasy football doctor that we talked to, Jeff Mueller. Anyway, I think there's reason to believe that he was limited by that. You're going to see, look, first round pick. Andy Reid's a smart coach. He got goal line, but I think he got 80% of their red zone touches last year. No reason to think he's not going to have the same role this year. I just think it's too early. And I think this is not the end of his career. He's I think you can buy him for something right now that you might not be able to in a few weeks.
That's what I wanted to ask both of you this before I move on to the next guy. On that pod last night, I was asked because they were both on the opposite end. They were basically on the Twitter majority. He's done kind of track. So they asked me, would I give a 20? Because I think this came up in a tweet that they were talking about on the show. Would I give up a 2023 first for CEH? And I said I'd do that in a second. And they were on the 2023 first side. Would you guys give up a 2023, especially that's supposed to be the better class, quote unquote, than 2022? So even though it's 2 years out, what do you think, Cal? You giving up a 23 first?
I am. So I think about things in terms of Superflex, and it's harder in Superflex because you expect the first round to be, have more talent there.
Yes, this is a Superflex oriented podcast. So yes.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit harder in Superflex. I'm not sure you have to, but if I have to, I'm 100% willing to do that for a running back. And then I absolutely think
if I could get him less than that, I'm doing that all day.
Sometime in the next 2 years, I think he's going to be worth a first again. I just don't think he's done. And look, that could be wrong. I've been wrong before. It's okay. I'll get over it. But I just don't think a first round pick that Pat Mahomes loves, that Andy Reid loves, that's getting the work that he's getting, he's going to gain value at a position that is pretty scarce.
What do you think, Addison? You paying a first for CEH right now? What, you haven't heard from you on CEH?
No, I'm not paying a 23 first for CEH because I think CEH at this point is just another running back that you could probably just get on draft day in your rookie picks anyway. But I do agree that I think that you don't need to pay that first. I'm actually currently in one of my dynasty leagues right now trying to see what I could trade for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because I think that he's at this point now where, depending on the person who has him in dynasty, you could flip. I think realistically, you could flip like Tyson Williams and a second round pick for Clyde right now. And like, I'm all about that.
All day.
Oh, so would I.
Like, holy crap.
To me, this is such a case of dynasty owners, which is crazy to me because this, even more so than anyone than I notice in redraft, we are so, as a community, overreactive to everything. Like so quickly. He had one really bad game, and now he's worth nothing. I was just pulling it up while you were talking. Through week 12 last year, he which is, I believe, the week he got hurt, he was RB12 in points per game, not total points per game. So he was an RB1 until he got hurt last year. And that was without, I don't have the touchdown number up in front of me. I have his fantasy point totals, but that was without a ton of touchdowns, I believe. He wasn't getting a lot of goal line work even last year. So I just think people are nuts to just overreact the way they are, where if I can get him for a second plus something else, like a Tyson Williams that's worth at best a second, oh my God, am I doing that all day?
Absolutely.
Yes. So, okay, we'll move on real quick. Saquon, Addison. Is Saquon going to be Saquon, or are we seeing either an injury marred season or maybe even the beginning of a decline?
Nope. Saquon's going to come back. He's been, kind of training wheeled and just slowly coming into getting back into form. He had like under 50% snaps in week 1. That jumped up to almost 90% last week. I know that the volume and the efficiency on the volume hasn't necessarily been there, but again, they faced 2 really good defenses like we discussed with Daniel Jones. I think that Saquon's just going to start to get going here a little bit. And I do expect him to come back to form. And even if he's not Saquon like 2018 Saquon, I think that he could still be, a borderline RB1 and definitely in that range of a lot of other running backs like, Joe Mixon or Austin Eckler or above Antonio Gibson, guys like that we just kind of expect to be in that range. I think Saquon's just going to kind of come back, and I think we're going to look at the end of the year and see Saquon sitting at like RB9. We're going to be like, he had a really good last 15 games.
Yeah, I'm with you, and I still think he has that top 5 upside. I think we see the beginning of the turnaround this week. They're playing Atlanta. That's not a great defense. the Atlanta may be able to score some points on them. They scored 20. They didn't have a great game against the Eagles, but they scored 25 on Tampa. So I think we started, and like you said, the usage went way up in week 2, and he's coming off now 10 days rest with 2 games under his belt. I think we see the turnaround this week. But Cal, well, you can comment on Saquon too if you want, but we'll also go into our last couple guys we were going to talk about, which was receivers. Again, 2 guys kind of surprising in the top 10 right now, Mike Williams, Hollywood Brown. And I was just going to kind of ask the same thing I asked about Daniel Jones and Derek Carr is can they keep this up, at least in terms of maybe low-end wide receiver 1 potential? So, like I said, if you want to say anything about Saquon, then move into the receivers.
Very quickly on Saquon, I fully expect him to get over what's going on with his knee. I do think for him to be super productive, he's also going to need to get over his Jason Garrettitis. As soon as that is over, then I think he'll be better. I think he's a bad offensive coordinator specifically for Saquon. But that's bet on talent. That situation will change. I love Mike Williams right now, and I looked up targets today. 3 wide receivers have double-digit targets in both their games, and it's Deontay Johnson, it's Cooper Kupp, and it's Mike Williams. I think there are a lot of reasons to be excited about what you're seeing. He's finally getting the volume. I think he's the kind of player that you can probably, count on to be a productive back-end wide receiver 1, maybe, super high-end wide receiver 2. The problem is I don't think you can buy him, because I think whoever believed the most in Mike Williams already has him. People who don't, they aren't going to trust him based on what they've seen so far. So I think, is he a buy? Sure, in the way we talk about it on Twitter, but in reality, I don't know that you can actually buy him, because the guy that loves him most already has him. And Hollywood looks great. I think I'm really curious to see what that does for Rashad Bateman, and does it lower what we like and the ceiling that we think Rashad Bateman could have. That's where I think the interesting conversation is with Hollywood.
Yeah, and from this season, I mean, Mike Williams has the targets so far, which seems more sustainable. Hollywood's doing a little more on efficiency so far, but he also has been doing this going back to last season, where Mike Williams is not. He had like a 6 or 7 game stretch to end the year last year, where he was producing as a borderline wide receiver 1. The last point you made, I think, is the biggest thing that worries me about Hollywood is Bateman coming back, and what's that going to do to him. But any thoughts on the 2 receivers, Addison, before we move on to Find Me a Trade?
I think Cal nailed it. I think the only thing that he said, not necessarily wrong, but I think it should be flipped, was not what does Hollywood's success do for Bateman, but what does Bateman do for Hollywood's success?
So. There you go. Flipping it around. Okay, so we are going to move on to our Find Me a Trade segment that we finish up with each week. We are going to look at a team that was submitted by a friend of the show, Corey Deaton at Dynasty Eeyore on Twitter. It's a sleeper league. It's a 12-team super flex, half PPR with no tight end premium, 6-point passing touchdowns, minus 2 interceptions with some small bonuses for big plays. They have a 27-man roster, only start 9, a QB, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, tight end, the super flex, and 2 flex. And what Corey said was it was an Empire League that just reset with a new startup after someone won back-to-back. He lost ATN. He said needs a lot of work. It feels like building for the future is probably best, but didn't want to wait too long because Empire Leagues might have a small window. And he said, I should have taken known QBs instead of rookies and gone elite wide receiver instead of Barkley and ATN. I don't know that I agree with that as the guy who likes to buy the lesser QBs, but I'm sure it sounds like Kel and Addison do. But I want to get into Addison's trade because Addison's trade is just nutballs to me, and I loved it.
Bonkers. So let's get weird.
Yeah. So first, though, Addison, I do want to go. We always like for the listeners to go over the guy's roster, which I did not do yet. I always tend to try and rush through that, and I forget to do it. So I don't want to do that this week. So he has Trevor Lawrence and Carson Wentz, as well as Zach Wilson at quarterback. He's got Barkley and James Robinson as the starting running backs. I'm just going to go through just what he has as a starting lineup right now and then get some of his backups. He got CeeDee Lamb, Marvin Jones at wide receiver, as well as Tyler Boyd and Rondale Moore. Tight end, he has Austin Hooper, On his bench, he's got Jamal Williams, Tony Jones, not much else at running back. So he's pretty shallow at running back. He does have Ayuk on his bench at wide receiver, KJ Osborne, Terrace Marshall, and a tight end. He has a bunch of tight ends, and Jared Cook, Cole Kmet, and then some younger guys with promise like Hunter Long and Harrison Bryant. And then on the IR, he has ETN, as we mentioned, as well as Curtis Samuel and N'Keal Harry. So that's the roster we're looking at. So some good pieces there. I tend to think he's not a contender this year. I believe from Addison's trade, he doesn't either. So Addison, now let's get into your trade.
All right. I had fun making this, actually. Yeah. Do you guys think this is crazy? Like, it's not a good deal? Or
I just think it's crazy because there's so many players in it.
There's a lot going on. Right.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in this trade. So we've hyped it up enough. You got to give the people the trade.
Yeah. So the way I approached this, I went in, I took a look at Corey's team and I was like, man, I don't really see the path for 2021, right? So I want to continue to build for the future. And I think that specifically in Superflex, the best way to go about that is to solidify having quarterbacks that have sustained dynasty value. And I really like those young guys because they're just kind of set it and forget it in both value and production at that point. I also don't believe in having running backs in a true rebuild. I don't really think you should have any running backs of top 35, top 40 value at all on your roster, especially in season, because you can be trading those guys to teams that have real needs at running backs that are trying to compete. So I looked at his team. I said that the best assets that he had were Saquon Barkley, of course.
Yep.
And then he also has some pretty, I think, immediate sells now because he's not competing in Marvin Jones, and also the potential of James Robinson and Curtis Samuel. So I built out the trade that was trading Saquon Barkley, Carson Wentz, Travis Etienne, and James Robinson, so that Jacksonville Jaguars backfield, Marvin Jones and Curtis Samuel to this team, Servants of the Dark Gods, for
I kind of love that team name, by the way.
That's a good team name. For Justin Herbert, Jerry Jeudy, and a 2023 first. So that's a lot. So
it
basically, the way that I unpacked this was I was looking at who actually could use those players, right? Because that's the other aspect of trades is you have to send these players to a team that actually needs them. This Servants of the Dark Gods team has Justin Herbert and Russell Wilson. His two starting running backs right now are Leonard Fournette and Devin Singletary. So obviously could definitely use a big bump up in the running back position. And Saquon Barkley, I think, would fit that very nicely, as would James Robinson as well. And then the way I went for Justin Herbert, because like I said, I want to target those top quarterbacks, but I sent Carson Wentz back because I think that kind of evens out, at least in a super flex. He's not losing a quarterback. He's gaining one back. And if you want to make the argument, Carson Wentz has actually been better on the season for fantasy over the last 2 weeks than Justin Herbert. So you can make that really fun argument there that Wentz is a better quarterback this year than Justin Herbert for fantasy. And then also he's getting Marvin Jones and Curtis Samuel, which I think are solid flex plays as well, because also on his team, he's starting Quintez Cephas. And you might be saying at this point, this team doesn't sound like they should be making this kind of trade. And I would say I agree, but I looked, they're 1-1. They lost this last week by 10. So they're 10 points away from being 2-0, being in third place in the league, even if I personally don't agree with that their team could make it all the way, especially when you look at some of the other teams in this league. But
there's many of us who believe we can contend for longer than we should believe we can. So yeah,
right.
I'm falling into that group sometimes.
Right. So that's what I saw. And I said here, I said, you could say this directly to that person while you're making this offer. Is like, you're 10 points away from being 2-0 and being third place in this league. Like, imagine how much better your team would look with the healthy Saquon Barkley in there as your RB1. You can even have James Robinson, who's receiving the bulk of the carries in the Jacksonville Jaguars offense. And those are both upgrades over Leonard Fournette and Devin Singletary in your running back positions. You get Marvin Jones, who's a big upgrade over Quintez Cephas. You can't really wait for Jerry Jeudy to come back, and how long that high ankle sprain injury takes to come back, and then what is he even whenever he does come back. So getting Marvin Jones really helps your wide receiver core. Curtis Samuel has the potential to come back in 2 weeks. He was on the 3-week IR, so he can come back in week 4. Adam Humphries has looked pretty solid, I think, is the wide receiver 2 across from Terry McLaurin. So if Samuel kind of takes that role, he could be pretty good for fantasy. And then, of course, we're also trading away Travis Etienne. So now imagine your team now with Saquon Barkley, James Robinson. You add Travis Etienne to that. He also has A.J. Brown and Jamar Chase and Kenny Galladay and Will Fuller. You get Carson Wentz, so you're not losing quarterbacks in a super flex league. And I think that is a fantastic deal for him. Obviously, a fantastic deal for you because you get your elite quarterback that you can build for the future with. You get the 2023 first, which I think is great as well. And you get Jerry Jeudy to pair with CeeDee Lamb for the future as you start to go through your rebuild and go through all of that. So that was my entire trade. And I made a note. I said, add your 2022 second. If he's teetering and not really sure, just push him over the edge with a 22 second.
Yeah, I saw this afternoon, and I think I'm still processing it. I'm still trying to
if you want one more additional thing, I actually put this in the trade analyzer, the DLF trade analyzer. This comes out to 1,341 points on the Saquon Barkley side and 1,339 points on the Justin Herbert side. So is
that with the package adjustment?
Trades. Yep, that's with the package adjustment. So it's, at least in terms of the DLF trade analyzer, one of the fairest trades I've ever seen come out of that thing. So
yeah, I mean, the simplest way I can look at it is, I mean, Jeudy and a 23 first to me is not enough for Saquon, but it's not that far off. And then so that leaves you with Carson Wentz, Etienne Robinson, Marvin Jones, Curtis Samuel for Justin Herbert, which I don't think is too bad. So I think I agree with the analyzer that Herbert's probably worth more than that, that 5-for-1 I just threw out there. But I think Saquon's worth more than the other side. So I think it does kind of even out. Like you said, it's going to depend if that guy really thinks he can contend. I think if he does, though, I mean, yeah, it's the other great thing about it is too, if he is thinking he can contend, you're having him give you 2 pieces. One that's a pick that's 2 years from now that he's probably not even worried about. And Jerry Jeudy, who's not scoring him any points, and you get
the next half of the season.
Yeah, and you get ETN is not either, but you get James Robinson, you get Saquon. If he's a Saquon believer, which we'll get into that in my trade too. I do think there's a wide variety of opinions on Saquon right now, but yeah, I like this trade. Like I said, it's crazy. I don't know if it'll get done in that exact form, but I love the idea of throwing it out there. And I mentioned multiple times in this podcast and to specific podcast tonight and in general that I don't like to pay up for QBs, but my exception to that is in rebuilds, I will buy QBs, high-end QBs, because I agree with you. I like in a rebuild to have them because they will hold their value longer. When I'm contending, I'm fine trying to cycle through the lower end guys, the Bradys, the Bens, the Daniel Joneses this year, the Kirk Cousins. But when I'm rebuilding and I know it's going to take a year or two at least, I like getting them, and then I'll sell them when I'm contending again, and I'll get a Brady, whoever at that time is a Brady plus, and that kind of thing. So I like this a lot. Any thoughts on this, Cal, before we move on?
I would love to have been inside of Addison's brain when he was putting this together. I think this is because, look, you're getting rid of assets that I don't think are going to appreciate outside of you. Like, the guy can really talk himself into Travis Etienne, right? Like, oh, I'm making this move and I'm giving him a first, but I'm getting Etienne and I'm getting Barkley. So he
also has Cam Akers on IR as well. He lost Cam Akers this year, so he can talk himself like
next year he has
Barkley, Etienne, and Akers, and that's so.
I
awesome.
love that.
That was another reason I like this trade. by the way, is I'm not a big ETN guy, so I didn't care about anything you were giving him except for Barkley. So that was another reason I really like this trade. Like Wentz is whatever, and James Robinson, is not good. James Robinson could produce probably a 1,500-yard season this year, and still not going to have any value next year. Right. So he's like Chris Carson reincarnated. So and Marvin Jones and Curtis Samuel are not going to be big value pieces either. So I'm sorry, I kind of interrupted you. You guys, were you going to go any further with that, Cal?
No, that was okay. That was it.
Yeah, I can't imagine what was going through his brain either. But I love it because I tend to be the one. I tend to be the one of the hosts that tends to come up with the biggest trades that we do on here, like some monster deals. But I don't think I've even come up with I can't even count 9-player deal. I think this is. I think it's 6 for 3 or 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 6 for 3. Yeah, I love it. So, Cal, we were talking before the show. I know you started a trade. Did you end up coming up with anything, or because I know you were short on time before the show to come up with one?
So when I first started looking at this, 2 teams jumped out, and it was the 2 teams that you guys ended up making a trade for. And part of it is, I love that you guys targeted someone who is not producing right now, but we fully expect dynasty-wise to be really good and have more value next year in Jerry Jeudy. And then you haven't done yours yet, but you did the same thing, Rocky. So I love that. Now, since I didn't want to just double dip on that, so I had to start looking at the league a little bit closer. And I'm really glad that I did, because if you look at the league itself, first of all, I think we've undersold that in this league, the top scoring person has 364 points in 2 weeks, and the player we're trying to help has 186. Like, it's almost 200 points less in 2 weeks. So there's nothing here, I think, for this year, and I have to work really hard to be competitive even next year, I think. But the pieces are here, and the good news is, I think when you look at the teams at the top, I do not think those teams are built to win back-to-back. Right now, I just don't. If you look at the team that scored the most, Tom Brady's their quarterback. They do have Jalen Hurts, which Rocky knows. Like, that is a little like, if you had to place an amount of money that mattered to you on whether he was the quarterback next year in Philly, like,
yeah, I'm skeptical myself as a guy who's in Philly. Yes. So
yeah, he's looked great. I love it. I hope he gets a chance to start there for the next 15 years. I think
I do as well. Actually, I really like the guy, and he's fun to watch.
Great leader. I love it. But like, there's a little bit of shakiness to his dynasty value because of how the organization so far has handled him. But then look, Dalvin Cook, like we're at the edge cliff and maybe injury cliff right now for Dalvin Cook. Aaron Jones, he's another one. His contract's coming up. So like, this team's scoring a lot of points. They're doing well. Tyreek Hill, Keenan Allen, like all these players are like right there at the edge. So is this team going to repeat? Like, I don't know. Like, how much value do a lot of these players have when it comes to next year? Could have some production, but like, those running backs could be in very different, or, hit that Todd Gurley wall that we get afraid of. And then if this guy ends up winning the championship, we're not really looking at him as somebody who's going to do it again. Kentucky Lawnmower, he's the next one. Like, he's another one that's 2-0, but kind of same thing. Like, a lot, he's got Hopkins, he's got Eckler, he's got Aaron Rodgers, like, these are his pieces that he's building around right now. That's not to me, in an Empire League, that's not you've got to have a team that's going to be on the rise for a couple of years, kind of at the same time. And I don't think that those players have it. So the one that I ended up finding and stumbling upon is this raging Randall Redwood. And I hope you don't listen to the show, wherever you are. Had the 101 because he's got Pat Mahomes, so I assume he had the 101. And then I don't like what he did with it after Pat Mahomes, like made the layup for Pat Mahomes. I don't love what he did, other than he walked away with an extra first, which is good. But I just don't like. Yes, he's 2-0, but he's got way less points than those top 2 teams, and less points even than somebody that's got somebody that's 1-1, but. At 2-0, you can talk yourself into being a competitor. And anytime you got Pat Mahomes, you can talk yourself into that, right? So my trade is I want those 2 first that he's got. And with Saquon, if this person fully believes he is competing, he's got Miles Sanders, he's got Antonio Gibson, which are good, but they're not Saquon. And if you can convince him that, like, with some of the negative buzz right now going with Gibson, you've got some of that everybody's all up on Gainwell, that hey, what he really needs is Saquon. Take those two first, because again, you need assets that the great thing about picks, they are 100% guaranteed between now and the draft of gaining value. There's nobody else you can invest in, nothing else you can invest in that's guaranteed to gain value the way a draft pick is. So he's in enough of a hole that's what I want to shoot for. And then there's a couple of other assets that I think you might can get thrown into here in Amon St. Brown or Ramondre Stevenson. They're just more of like, they're young players. They've got some buzz. We've differing opinions on them, but some people do have, some hope for them. And if the right people have hope for those players at the right time, you may be able to flip them too, or maybe you believe in them and can invest in them. Maybe you don't. Bryan Edwards is another one that maybe you want to target. I'm not a big Bryan Edwards believer. I know a lot of people are. So maybe you get the 2 first and Bryan Edwards instead. But I think that is worth moving Saquon for. And I think you're looking at a couple-year rebuild. So I want those assets. If he's got the number 1 pick plus 2 other picks that, based on what I'm looking at, could be mid-round, like, that's a good, solid base that you can now rebuild yourself. And I'm not as worried about giving Saquon to the Patrick Mahomes team, because I don't think he's good at building a team.
Hopefully he's not listening, like you said. It's funny because we all kind of had a similar setup for our trades. And I think something I wanted to point out, we kind of do this with a specific roster, but we like to kind of take general takeaways from it. And I think 2 of them that we can hear, as I'll go into my trade in a minute, is one, definitely, you got to find that best asset. You got to be honest with your team. Find that best asset if you need to rebuild. And especially in this case, you have a really high-end running back that you don't really want to hold on to in a rebuild anyway. And I don't even know if it'll be a long rebuild. I think he does have a lot of nice pieces in place. He's got CD, he's got Trevor Lawrence, he's got some other receivers. And the other thing was, I think it's a really good thing. I think we all kind of did this too, is target, especially in season. I love to target. I think you actually targeted the guy that was 2-0, but not in point. He wasn't the highest guy in points. And I targeted the guy who was 1-1. He was like 5th in points, that he still probably believes he's a pretty good team. That's what I like to do, is not that I don't want to go for the top guy usually. I want to go for the guys, a couple spots below there that may not be as good as they think. But if they do think they're good, you can get some stuff out of them that maybe they shouldn't even be giving up. And if you get picks in the deal, it's even better, because those picks could be worse than those guys think they're giving up. So I just wanted to point those 2 things out. I really like your trade too, Cal. I think the value's even. I think Saquon should be worth at least 2 first still, and you get the little add-ons. And it's kind of very similar to what I did. I think the value. I didn't get all picks. I'm trying to see if I remember. I did have 1 pick in there, but I think it's kind of 2 first plus as well, is basically the value that we're talking about with mine. And as I said, that's what I did. I targeted, I think the guy's like 5th in points. He's 1-1. So he probably thinks he's doing okay. And if he gets a guy like Saquon, that he could really take it to the next level with his team. As we said, I just like, this guy does have to look to the future. I do think that doing something like, I do like getting the picks, like you said, especially since they were 2022. I kind of like that even more, because he wants to try and turn this around quickly. So what I did was similar. I offered it to team, this exciting team name of Team BJS6G3. And I offered Saquon Barkley, Marvin Jones, and a third. The third was just to make it look nice, because I don't care about thirds. So you just add another piece, and they think they're getting 3 for 3. And for Waddle, Bateman, and a first. So Jalen Waddle, Rashad Bateman, and a first. Again, this guy can definitely think he's contending. He does have some good pieces, and he, again, kind of like what I said with Addison's trade, is that he's giving up really sort of three pieces that aren't doing that much for him right now. In Waddle, Waddle's the only one that's produced anything. The first obviously isn't getting you any points, and Bateman's been on IR, and he's got a lot of veteran guys on his team. He can rationalize having Saquon, gives him a better chance at the title, gets him closer to that top team, brings an obvious lineup upgrade. I wasn't sure myself how to. I value Saquon pretty highly, like Addison does. I still basically value him pretty close to Saquon's value coming into the season. I mean, that's another thing I wanted to mention here with this all talking about Saquon is I think it's funny. Everybody said, and the Giants told us he is going to start slow, and then he starts slow, and we all start panicking. So I definitely think we're going to see Saquon, and so basically, I liked doing that. You throw in Marvin Jones, the piece I absolutely do not care about for our team, because he has no value, not much value now. But since he scored well the first two games, maybe that means something to the guy. It also helps he's losing two receivers, picking up a guy who scored like 15 points each game. You can try and sell him on that. So he sells these three pieces, gets Waddle Bateman in the first, and I wasn't sure if that was it might be an overpay just to. First, it wasn't to me, but to the market. And I put in two calculators. It's funny. DTC had an overpay for Saquon, and DLF Trade Analyzer had Saquon as an overpay for the other side. So I guess maybe that means it's a fair trade. I don't know. But what do you guys think of that one? And then we'll finish up here. So, Cal, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I love it because you're kind of getting – three first if you do this with your deal, because Bateman and Waddle were first this year, but like I don't know that we think about it in those terms. And
yeah, I do think in Superflex Bateman was an early second in some drafts, but
yeah, you're right in Superflex. Yeah, so I think that ends up getting really good value, and then I like that you guys are adding in some of these pieces. The Marvin Jones, these that could be just a little bit of extra, like the person can talk themselves into it. And, with a little bit more time, I think I would have tried to put a little bit of that in there too. Because I love that strategy. Get, something in there, but in Dynasty, that's not a piece that you're building with for the future. So yeah. And adding that 3rd round pick, genius, always do that. It makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, it makes it look nicer. I'm getting three pieces. I'm giving up three pieces. My co-host on Trade Addicts and Addison's Trade Show co-host Russ always says thirds get deals done. So yeah, I like that. Any thoughts on this trade before we sign off here, Addison?
I like it too. I do wonder if it is if it's too much for Saquon Barkley, or if that guy's going to view it as too much for Saquon.
That's what I was wondering. That's why I put it in the calculators.
Yeah, like I am kind of worried. And I do like you made a note down here that you like maybe you wait a week or two and Saquon kind of comes back to Saquon and his value kind of comes back up, and then you can get that kind of value for Barkley with Waddle Bateman and a first. But I do like it too, and obviously quarterbacks and wide receivers, those are the two positions that you want when you're going for a rebuild, and picks. And you don't want running backs, and we don't really care about tight ends,
especially in a no premium league.
Right. So I did like that. I like Cal's as well. I thought, just going straight for picks, you get the upside dart throws in Amon-Ra and Ramondre Stevenson. Those two kind of trades are basically the trades that I started doing, because I think that there's a bunch of opportunities for Corey to trade away Saquon Barkley, right? And it's just, finding the teams that are willing to take on Saquon and getting the most value for him. And I'm glad that we're all in consensus with moving Saquon Barkley. And I like that a lot, because I do think that there are I went through, Uncle Rico, the number one team, like his team's insane. But if you move down through the two other 2-0 teams and a couple of those 1-1 teams that we targeted as well, that could talk themselves into being contenders, I think Saquon Barkley would fit on a handful of those teams, and it's just like I said, just whatever gives you the most value, and do that one.
Yeah, and I did mean to mention, like you said, the point about possibly waiting for Saquon too, because I think the second that first game, I think his value will shoot up. If he goes to Atlanta and has 19 for 120 and 6 catches for 50 yards. He's gonna, that first Saquon game, he's gonna explode in value. So, and I don't think, especially if I'm hoping with Saquon it only takes another game or two, but especially if it does, I don't think you're losing like much opportunity here either, because especially now with Tua out, I don't think Waddle or Bateman are gonna go up much in value, where the guy's gonna in 2 weeks be more tentative to give those two up. So I don't think you lose much either if you do wait a week or two and see if Saquon has that game first. But really good talk, guys. I want to thank you both again for coming on tonight. We're already an hour and a half here, and it's just flown by. I really appreciate it. Addison and Cal, I want to give you both a chance to just kind of sign off, give your Twitter handles to everybody, tell everybody what you're doing, where they can find you. So Addison, you go first, and then we'll do Cal.
Oh yeah, well, thank you so much for asking me to come on. This was super fun. I loved the, create a trade segment. I thought that was awesome.
Thank you.
Really fun to do, both as as somebody doing it, but I could see that being a major value for a lot of other people. Something that I might steal down the future, but but no, yeah, thank you so much. So at Amaze's _ on Twitter. That's I'm not really very Twitter active, but I am on there. The big thing though is the DLF YouTube channel, of course. I mean, it's where basically all of my content is going. Cal as well. Cal is fantastic, and I always say, like, join the YouTube channel and subscribe to it, because you get a bunch of content from not only me, but Cal and Tyler do the Ask DLF show on Tuesday. We have Mannequin Show, like I mentioned earlier in the episode, from Scott and Shane. The DLF podcast goes on there. The trade show with Russ and I. We have other live streams, like the Superflex live stream with John Hogue. Peter Howard does a live stream on Wednesday nights. We have content, crazy going on every single day of the week on the DLF YouTube channel. So hit that subscribe button on here and on the DLF YouTube channel while you're already on YouTube. And yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Cal, what you want to just give your Twitter handle and again where they can find you, all that good stuff.
Yeah, at Calvin and Hobby, right here on the screen. Make sure you look. I love interacting with people on Twitter. I have a lot of fun with it. I'm like Addison. Like most of my stuff that I do, it might be late at night. It might, but stuff like that. It's not necessarily during the day super active, but I have a lot of fun doing it. I've had a blast on the YouTube channel with Addison. We've been doing some stuff on Sunday morning. We released a good injury show there week 1. Talked a lot about injuries Sunday morning with Jeff, who I mentioned earlier. And that's really good. So because of that, we've had a good take. I did a dynasty. This is what I think your listeners would probably like the most is on Tuesday nights, Ask DLF with me and Tyler Carr. We just take dynasty questions for right now. It's an hour and a half. We dialed it back because we do have more content, other days of the week, but we were doing 4 hours where we were just literally taking dynasty questions like you had from Really a Truther in here for hours and literally just answering questions, talking about strategy. A lot of fun, great chat. So, and what's cool is there's some really smart people that are in the chat that are answering questions too. And so like some of it is us talking and others, it's just there in the YouTube channel, having a conversation and, answering questions, running things by each other. It's really cool. So yeah, I think people who like this would probably also like that show.
Okay, so yeah, everybody go check out Cal, go check out Addison, all their stuff on DLF. It's fantastic. Again, I want to thank you two both for coming on, and I just want to finish up with some of our business here. I just want to give the Twitter handle that you can follow the pod at, which is at Dynasty Junkies. You can follow the DAP Network at DAP_network. That is where you will see the live feed pop up every Thursday at 9:30. We'd love for more people to come into the chat. We had Ridley Truth. They're all here all night, pretty much commenting, asking a couple questions that we got on the show. We'd love to answer more questions. So feel free to I know, people are watching the game, but sometimes we have, sometimes we have the Texans versus the Panthers, and who cares? So come watch a Dynasty pod, or maybe you can watch the 2 screens. Watch one on your phone and watch one on the TV. But Follow Andrew Hall FF at Andrew Hall FF at Scott_Stay my other two hosts who will be on the upcoming weeks again. Please subscribe to the YouTube for DAP Network. That's how you can see this also on YouTube, as well as Fantasy Timeline. Also goes live every week on Twitter and YouTube. And occasionally Trade Addicts will pop up there. So make sure you're following the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network on YouTube. Give a like, subscribe, rate, review the pod. Give us a 5-star. Don't give us a 1-star. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you like. Let us know what you don't like. And it'll help people find us. So I think that'll do it for this week. And we'll be back next Thursday. Junkies out.